faceoff. Shoots it, deflected. Right in. Pietrangelo save rebound. Stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Neither does Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie sparkling on that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He should get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to episode 57 of Tendy Talk, presented by the BLPA and the Hockey Podcast Networks. I'm your host Joe, better known as Wash Up Goalie on social media. This week I chat with 3-time Olympian and 4-time world champion Hockey Canada goalie Sami Jo Small. Did I forget to mention she's also an author? Sami Jo released the book The Role I Played last year, chronicling her journey in women's hockey. I just finished listening to the audiobook and it's a great book. You need to get it if you haven't done already. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Sami Jo. Sami Jo, thanks for joining me. It's a thrill to have you on as a goalie who, grew up watching Olympic hockey. And I was one of those that it didn't matter who was playing. If it was Olympic hockey on TV, I was watching it. So I remember watching those Nagano games and those Salt Lake City games and the Torino games. So, it's fun to, be able to connect now.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I am always excited to talk anything goaltending. So this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I got all my questions, that I bulleted out, but we can't ignore your awesome Vaughn pads you've got in that picture behind you that's on your book cover. Because I'm currently waiting for my first set of custom pads from Vaughn, waiting for them to arrive. And I'm just, so I love those. Those look like V2s.
So yes, at the time they were custom. Those are circa 2005. So they have been around for a while, but I loved the maple leafs on them.
Yeah.
And it was something that at the time Vaughn didn't really do, was to really change too much about the look of them, but They did that for me, which was really nice. And this is kind of pre being able to have pad wraps or anything like that. So once that became possible, then I feel like the sky's the limit. But this was something that was kind of unique at the time. So I love those pads. When I was trying to decide on the book cover, it was really hard for me because I had so much equipment from over the years that I loved. And what would resonate with readers and what did I feel sort of personified that era, and but also what could look up kind of relatively modern on a shelf as well and not feel like it was from 20 years ago it actually is. So
well, it's funny you say 20 years ago because the set I'm wearing is Vaughn Legacies, the same style that Eddie Belfour wore in Dallas when he won the cup. I'm still wearing those. So
awesome.
It's like I love the old patterns, and it's you mentioned Vaughn really not straying from their stock graphics until recently. And when I went to order my pads, I didn't want I didn't want the standard graphic because I know I'm going to have them for a while. So you go with the standard graphic, it looks pretty outdated pretty quickly. And so I was able to lean on some other folks I know to pressure them to give me the custom graphic I want. And so we're literally in the any day phase of getting them shipped out to me. So I'm pretty excited to see them in person.
Well, I've done a lot of work recently with Warrior because my husband is sponsored by Warrior. He's a sled hockey player. And so I just ordered a new set of Warrior gear. And when I went to get fitted for it, the difference in just the technology and everything is just incredible. I mean, amongst all the lines, it's not just Warrior, but I am excited for those to arrive because really I'm still in, what is probably a 10-year-old pad at this point. And the difference in the lightness and the strapping and just everything, I had to have a girl from the store help me figure out how to strap it.
Yeah. I've told the story a couple times on the podcast. I showed up to a beer league game about an hour early. I still show up to the rink an hour early before beer league games and sit in the locker room all by myself. But it was a summer league game and there was a high school team getting on the ice and for just their summer camp, and they only had one goalie, and coach looked at me and goes, "Hey, if you want some extra shots, come on out." And I was like, "All right, cool." And I'm standing along the boards as he's going over a drill, and the other goalie kind of looks behind. He's like, "What's with all the straps?" Because each of my I still have 2 straps that go under the boot. The pads I have when I first bought them had the toe buckle that I swapped out for skate laces. But he's like, "What's with all the straps?" He didn't even have one on his, just 3 Velcro straps on his. And I just started laughing. I said, "Yeah, that's how we used to do it, buddy."
Yeah. I know, working with so many young goalies now, I've had to figure out how to help them get their pads on, especially in the pandemic. And so it has been interesting to see sort of the transition of, so, I mean, I know how it all works. It's not like I don't know how it works, but just the difference. And, thinking back to why we did things the way we did, like, why did we have a belt loop under our skate with our toe cap showing, why was that a thing, and then obviously then the cap came over that was this extra piece of gear. And but now that you see it just as one piece, it just makes so much more sense, and
when we were young, it was, you almost wanted to treat your pad as a tourniquet and cut off the circulation to your leg. You wanted it as tight as possible. Now these pads are just rotating willy-nilly on the legs. It's
well, the
crazy.
To me, the best set of padding that I ever received was my first set of pads. We used to do skate saves. That's shows my age a little bit.
Me too.
When you open up your leg, you always got it on the inside of your calf, right?
Yeah.
And my pad only had a little thin thing of felt. Now, why we would turn our foot to expose it to the puck, I mean, it's beyond me. That just seems ridiculous, but it's what we did, right? It seemed like the smart thing to do at the time. But I got these extra plastic things from Cooper that went on the inside of your calf and made all the difference.
Yeah.
You think about it years later, it's like, why would we turn this massive giant pad the other way and expose the back of your leg? Like,
I was playing in a pickup skate Saturday night, and I just instinctively did a skate save and turned my leg over and everything. And I just started laughing. I was like, where did that come from? Why did I do that? And that was stupid.
Hey, it's just another tool in your repertoire, right? You pull it out whenever you need it.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a goalie. He's the Nashville E-Bug, Dustin Smith. He's on Instagram as Bones, and he's fascinated by the old style of hockey. And so he's got a vintage pair of Jofa pads, brown leather pads from the 80s. And he got the old 2-piece chest protector and everything.
With the monkey arms, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, that's not vintage to me. That's my first association set right there.
Totally.
And we've gone back and forth, and I told him he's got to come up to Minnesota so we can shoot some content, and I can teach him proper 2-pad stack recovery, proper skate save, because that's what I learned in goalie clinics when I was a kid. And he's like, that would be awesome.
I still teach it at my camp because I think there's a certain athleticism to it that you might never use it in a game.
Yeah.
But to actually do a proper 2-pad stack and be able to get out of it quickly, it is an athletic endeavor. Knowing the proprioception of your limbs and where they are in space is really important to know. And it's not something that's really taught anymore.
Yeah, I think when a lot of kids do the 2-pad stack, if they do it, they just roll over onto their belly and, do the push-up to get up. It's like, no, you keep yourself square to the puck and, take
the back leg goes under and
Yeah, it's funny. I still remember my goalie coach, Darren McCluskey. He was just drilled it home to us how to properly do it. And we do it over and over and over. It seemed like the whole practice sometimes we're just doing 2-pad stack recovery.
I can remember the same thing with a skate save where you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4 as you're like coming out, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and just like the coach counting it over and over and over and over.
Yeah, it's
monotonous.
Yeah, it's funny, some of the things we used to do in those old goalie schools, but at the same time, so much of what we did still pertains to, teaching goalies today, because it is very much angles and proper stance,
Exactly. And something, I think a lot of it has come back now, being able to skate and move your body at the same time, being able to use your stick as an extra piece of equipment to hit the puck out of the air, eye-hand coordination, all those kind of things that were so normal back then, and then were totally taken out of the game. And now sort of the reaction, the necessity to be out there and to not be, to react to the puck again. Yeah. I like it. I like that that's come back.
I've been excited to see the poke check making its way back into the game. That's a lost art.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is necessary to come back. I love it.
Yeah, it's fun. Every once in a while, I go down the YouTube wormhole watching 90s goaltending, and it's just everybody just had this crazy style back then, and it's hard not to just get lost watching those old videos. So we've been talking like 10 minutes here, and I haven't even started on my notes. So that's usually what happens, when two goalies start talking. And usually I start off asking people, how did they get started in hockey? Why goalie? But you cover that in your book, The Role I Played. So I want to encourage listeners, if they haven't already, read the book or get the audiobook. I did that so that I could get through it in time for our interview, and finished it this morning, actually. So
thank you. That's very nice.
It's a fantastic book. And, I connected with it in many ways. The first is, you are a student athlete, and, I played college hockey too. So I get like the whole education comes before, and especially with women's hockey, I think even still today, there is that emphasis on the education part of it, because women hockey players aren't making a living the way men can. Even at the minor league levels, guys can make a living out of it. Whereas, on the women's side, especially when you were playing, you couldn't. So you had to get that education. And you didn't, go the easy route. You decided, hey, I want to go to Stanford and I want to be a mechanical engineer. So not only do you go to one of the toughest schools in the nation, but you choose a field that to this day is still very male dominated. So you went a really cool route, in my opinion, especially, reading the books, knowing your dad was an optometrist, your brother was going to school for it. What drew you to mechanical engineering?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with goaltending. It's interesting. I didn't know growing up what engineers did. I feel like that term wasn't really widely thrown around in my school. Being from Winnipeg, not too many people leave Winnipeg. Most people go to school at University of Manitoba or University of Winnipeg. And so, when it came to career day, there probably was engineers there, but I guess I never really knew what they did. And I started in pre-med, as I mentioned in the book. And I liked it. I thought that's what smart people did. And it wasn't until I volunteered at a hospital that I realized that as a doctor, it is your full-time job. I mean, it needs to be your passion. And it really wasn't my passion. I liked it, but I just couldn't foresee myself spending 24 hours on a shift, for instance. And it was sort of midway through my Stanford career. And at Stanford, you don't really have to declare your major till after your second year. So you're allowed this kind of grace period of figuring out what you like and what you want to do. And I took a mechanical engineering class, and it was the first time that I got to use my hands to build things. And my entire life, I had broken down goalie equipment, and I had pieced it back together, and I had sort of makeshift equipment that I had always fabricated. My mom made my very first pair of pads out of an old pair of corduroys that she had that she just stuffed for me to play street hockey with. And then with my goalie sticks, I used to take old yogurt containers and cut them in pieces and then melt them on the bottom of my goalie stick so it would last on the road. So little things like that I was always kind of tinkering with things, and I loved using my hands to fabricate things and be artistic. And mechanical engineering kind of had that good kind of combination of the mathematical side and technical thinking, which I was very strong in, but I also had this artistic side that I wanted to be creative and create things. And it wasn't until I took my first course that I realized that this is what engineers do. They make things, and they get to see things from the beginning till the end and have this creativity around it. So I fell in love with what it was and what it represented. And my final year at Stanford, my final project was actually upper body goaltending equipment for women. So I got to kind of come full circle with two things that I really loved. And the upper body goalie equipment was actually just made from plastics from the local plastic store in a dollar bin. But I ended up wearing that at the World Championship. So,
you know, and it's funny you say it, because I remember listening to something that Moan Room was talking about of, you know, even when she was going to the Tampa Bay camp, she was using junior equipment because that was all that fit her, but she knew it didn't have the protective, you know, padding that she needed. And the equipment manager is like, we got to do something about this. And that was just the nature of equipment at the time for female goalies.
Not even just females, but I think all goalies, we always, you know, we tinkered with stuff. And for a lot of us, you know, I think our first sets of equipment came from community centers.
Yep.
And so it wasn't for us, right? And so how can you make it kind of fit your body and your mold and the style you play? And I don't know. I feel like a lot of goalies are kind of tinkerers that way, and lends itself to kind of that engineering spirit.
I remember talking to Eddie Balfour about it. I mean, he's one of the most famous ones of always working on his equipment to only sharpen his own skates. And when I talked to him, his son Dane was on, and he you know, said, yeah, they would be taking pads apart at home and everything else. He said the difference was, you know, when Ed would get a pair, he'd go, yeah, I can feel a shutout in these pads. And Dane said, I've never felt a shutout in pads. I just hope I can make a save.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, and Eddie went on to become a huge car guy, and it makes sense because you're still kind of tinkering with things, you know, trying to get the most out of a product.
Well, and look at how many goalies are car guys too. I mean, you got Mike McKenna, Craig Anderson, there's a whole host of them that, they like to tinker. And if I'm not a car guy, but what do I do around the house? I tinker around the house. I'm always working on a project.
Exactly. We all have things that we're doing. Or there's this like artsy side to some goalies too that tend to just want to like create the cool pads or make the cool mask, or it kind of gravitates. I think a lot of people are kind of drawn to the position because you get to have that creativity about it.
Well, we definitely do have that creative side of the brain working.
I think we have too much time on our hands.
Yeah, too much time. As puck's at the other end, we're always thinking about what are we going to do next. But getting back to the mechanical engineering, you said some stuff that, you know, really hits home, because I have a 14-year-old daughter. She very artistic, phenomenal artist, but ever since she was little, she always liked to build things. And her favorite cartoon was Tinkerbell, you know, she was a Tinker Fairy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've been saying for years, you know, you're going to wind up being a mechanical engineer. And she's like, well, what's that? And we try explaining to her, and she's like, I don't know. But even now that she's in high school, and, you know, some of the classes they have, it's actually called Design Make. And she's like taking that, where they're learning about 3D printers and stuff like that. And it's like that.
Yeah, the whole maker culture makes it sound a lot cooler.
Yeah.
I feel like when I, you know, growing up, what did I think an engineer did? I don't know. I thought they built bridges, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't something within my realm. But I do feel like they're doing a better job now of, first of all, introducing it to students in general, but specifically getting women and girls involved in it, because I think that it lends itself to a whole different kind of way of thinking outside the box. And many of my peers at Stanford didn't necessarily end up as full-time mechanical engineers. They ended up in different professions. But what it does is it really teaches you to think about a problem from the start to the end, and think about various different solutions and how to help others in the issues and problems that they have, and never really get stuck on one idea or one solution. But, you know, you're always trying to come up with new things. It's like goaltending. You have to teach every goalie that comes across your path a different way, because they have a different body, they have different strength, different weaknesses, and you have to think about ways to tell them in different ways to share the same information. And I think that comes from my engineering background. So I'm glad that she likes that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people love it. They just don't know that that can be a real job.
Yeah, and I've been, not just me, but me and my wife, we've been trying to foster it too, you know, as we've been doing all these projects around the house during the pandemic, you know, she was helping out, and, you know, we were talking, we're like, you need some of your own tools. So we took her and she got her own drill, and like, she loved it. It's like, first thing you got to do when you get your own tools is put your name on it. And she's like, well, why is that? It's like, well, have you met your papa? If he sees a tool that he thinks is useful and there's not a name on it, he's going to claim it as his own. And she's like, oh, so as soon as we got home, she got the Sharpie out, wrote her name on it. And it's like, and I'll probably be using it too. So, you know, whenever I go to the hardware store, I look around, okay, what tool can I add to her tool bag now? So
that's awesome.
We're slowly building up her tools at the same time. And I try and get her to help me with projects when she can. And
well, I just think it's such a great activity for, well, parents and kids, but also, you know, you're so engrossed in something, and whether you're painting, you know, a canvas, or you're involved in a project, it's just this, like, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a mindless activity, because it can create so much in your brain. It allows you to have that balance in your life that allows your brain to just kind of wander and think about other things, and appreciate how things are made, and the amount of work and effort that goes into every single product and every single thing. My favorite times as a goalie over the years has been the times that I've been able to go to the manufacturers and be able to go into the workplace where they are making all of the stuff. Like, I just feel like a kid in a candy store, you know, I just love it so much.
Yeah, I had to laugh. She just texted me, are you talking about me? Because her bedroom's right next to my office, so she can hear me. I say, yep, I am.
Tell her, yeah, she's the next Rosie Revere, the engineer, right?
Yes, exactly. You know, like I said, we're definitely trying to foster it as much as we can, because there's a need, you know, for skilled, you know, people.
Well, and there's also a need to encourage, you know, when you see a passion in a young child, to allow that to flourish and to help them realize that there's so many amazing things they can do. So tell your daughter that there is lots of female engineers out there that are doing some incredible things in the world.
One of the awesome things we have here in Minnesota is our Fox affiliate. When we're not in a pandemic, they have, they call it Girls in Science at our science museum. It's a one-day deal, and they have all kinds of stuff. And some of it's, you know, engineering, some of it's robotics, some of it's weather related. And, you know, it's just come in, experience it all. Abbott Laboratories, they come with a couple pig hearts, and they let the kids pick up these pig hearts and play with them. And that's kind of fun to see the gross looks on the faces, but it's really fun to go there and just see the whole museum just filled with girls. And then they, last time we went, they brought in Kate, the chemist from the University of Tech. I think she's with the University of Texas in Austin, and she's got some great books out on, you know, science and whatnot, but she's very much a proponent of girls in science. And so she had
that's awesome.
Really
we have a book called Ada Twist Scientist that we read to our daughter. So who knows what they end up becoming, but all you can do is expose them to it. And I think that's really great that you guys are doing that.
Yeah. And so we're pushing her, well, not pushing her to be, but, you know, fostering that passion of hers. And then my son, he's a year younger, and he came home, I think it was in the 3rd grade. And he goes, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. And I went, can you tell me what an aerospace engineer does? And he could. And I was like, okay, you just might. And now he's in 8th grade, and he's taken that design make class, and he just 3D printed an Saber jet. Like, he took the time to model it up on the computer, everything else. I was like, this just might happen. I was like, all right, I don't have to worry about my retirement, because he's going to be able to take care of me. You know, so the other interesting thing is, you know, you're going into engineering. It's a male dominated field. But there is that push to really get girls, you know, interested, not just in engineering, but science. You know, what advice do you have for girls that are kind of considering, you know, those STEM fields, but maybe are a little apprehensive because there's not many girls in those classes, you know, not people that look like them per se.
Right. You know, what's interesting about Stanford was, even at the time when I went to school in the 90s, there was a lot of women. So I never really got the sense that it was male dominated until it came time to be in the workforce. And then obviously it was different. But I think the great thing about being at Stanford, and maybe even specifically the engineering that I was in, which was product design, which was within mechanical engineering, has a lot more art component to it. So maybe lent itself more, women were attracted to it for certain reasons. But so I never felt excluded, and I think that that's really important. But wherever somebody grows up in North America, there are some great programs for women in science, women in engineering, women in tech, and I think it's really important to reach out to others that are like-minded, and that goes for whatever you're interested in. I read a great book by Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, and one of the best things that came out of that book was, whatever you are interested in or whatever you're passionate about, to join the association. Now that is more for adults, but as kids, join a club, join something that you get to be around other people that have the same passions as you, because that's going to inherently foster the conversation. That's going to push you in directions you never knew existed. And that's really been one of the things that it was the huge takeaway for me from that book, was there is so many other people like you out there. And there's so many, clubs and professions that, might not seem like they are for people like you, but if you think it, then there must be others like you out there that are thinking the same thing. So, try to find them. And as parents, I think it's up to us too, to really help with that journey and with that ability to allow the kids to, find what is their passion, but support them in their endeavors, just like what you guys are doing with your kids. And so for young girls that are interested in anything within the STEM world, I would say that there is no limit, that you can achieve so many great things. But the great thing about engineering and science is that it is a team, and it is like being, playing hockey. It's like being a part of this amazing team, and each person in that team brings a different, plays a different role, but brings this different background and has different knowledge. And that's the great thing about science and technology, is that it just is never ending, and you're on this continuous pursuit of knowledge that, even for me, for the next 20, 30, 40 years, who knows how long I'm going to be alive for, but there just is, you can always learn. And that's the fun thing about it. So never think it isn't for you.
Yeah. Well, I was just putting 2 and 2 together, and I definitely think my daughter's going to wind up going down that route, because like you, she's got the dual first name. You're Sami Jo, she's Gertie Bell. So it's like, okay,
nice. Like
you got to have the
she's destined. I love it.
Exactly. In fact, I remember when I was coaching high school hockey at the time she was born, and I came back for first practice after she was born, and the other coaches go, well, what did you name her? So Gertie Bell Jean. And the one looks at me and goes, well, that's just a country star waiting to happen.
I know. Everybody thinks I'm from like deep south in Texas or something.
No, just the deep south of Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk some hockey now. And before we go into all of the Olympic stuff and all of that, you scored a goal. I mean, when you talk about things goalies want to do, we want to win championships and everything else, but deep down, we all want to score a goal. That's got to be one of your top bragging points, doesn't it?
Well, it's interesting because most people don't know, and it wasn't really until I wrote this book that a lot of people found out that I scored a goal. But when, you play a sport that is, you really are toiling away in obscurity. It's not like our games are on television, and even our club team championships, the top players in the world, there wasn't social media back then. There wasn't, so the people that were at the game obviously knew, my teammates knew, but that dissipates over time, over years, and new players come into the game that don't know. And so most people actually have had no idea. And it's been on my bio, but I don't know if people really kind of honed in on that, just how different that was for a goalie to do.
Yeah.
and especially in women's hockey, that it was, I mean, who knows if that's ever happened before. We don't really have stats to prove or disprove it. So I can say it's the only one, but I might not be the case. Who knows? So, but yes, I was very fortunate to have sort of the stars align. You know, that's the thing with most goalies, is that we're just not often placed in that situation. And then when we are placed in that situation, for the right players to be in the right spots on the ice, and for that one time, the puck to go right down the middle of the ice. So I combination of working on my shot a lot, along with a lot of luck.
Yeah. I mean, look at any goalie when they get the chance, they're shooting that puck back and forth to each other. When everybody's off to the side, we're just always practicing. When we get that one shot, we hope we can do it.
Well, and if you can remember back in the day too, I mean, your shot was always the best when you got a new stick.
Yeah.
Right. And then it slowly got worse throughout the season as that stick, because there were wood sticks that got heavier and it got expanded. And so it also was at the start of a season. So had that same opportunity happen maybe midway through the season, you don't have as strong a shot. You know, your stick is whippier, and it's not like today where you can just go and, you know, get another stick. And that did not happen to us back in the day.
No, it didn't, you know, but so you score the goal, but people are going to associate you more with being a 3-time Olympian. You know, it was Nagano, the very first women's Olympic appearance, and then Salt Lake City. And I'm not going to lie, a little heartbroken still about that loss of the Americans. And then Torino. But 2 of those 3 Olympics, you were the number 3 goalie. And at that time, the 3rd goalie didn't get a medal. What are those emotions? I mean, you're happy, you touched on it a little bit in the book. You're happy for the team, but there's got to be some kind of letdown. Even though the team won, there's got to be some kind of deeper feeling of, man, that sucks.
You're right. I mean, I talk a lot about this in my presentations, and I now work full-time as a professional speaker. And that's the real crux of my presentation, is that we're all placed in these situations that just kind of suck sometimes. You know, it's true. It's obviously both situations were different. Nagano was a different experience because I was a rookie on the team. And so while it was hard to not receive a medal because I didn't really know that would be happening, there wasn't really the same type of disappointment for months and months after. It was, you know, I didn't feel like I got cut from the team in Nagano. I felt like I was lucky enough to get into a 3rd goalie position. And so depending on where you're at in your career, it's different. And then come Torino, when I was wanting to be in a different position in, you know, either the starter or the backup, and relegated up to the stands, that was really difficult. And when our team won and I looked up and, you know, we had won the gold medal, and I rushed down to the ice to be with my teammates. And obviously in the celebration, you know, you get swept away in it, and you're just so excited. But then I had to go into the players' box and watch them receive their medals. And it was really at that moment that you just, your heart sinks. And I think all of us have been in situations like that in our lives, where you just want it to be different. And it is such a normal, natural human reaction for you to want your team to not possibly go on without you, for you to want your family to not possibly go on without you, for your workplace to not possibly go on without you. But the reality is that they do, and people's lives move on, and they won a gold medal on that ice without me on the ice. And I think that's what was hard, is that, you know, realizing that my role was different, and feeling like I was supposed to learn this amazing lesson through it all. And I just didn't. It was just difficult and hard. And so I talk about that in my presentations, that it's okay to acknowledge that, and it's okay to feel that. And I think it's important you feel it. You don't just kind of sweep it under the rug. But there comes a time where you have to move on, and you have to realize that you did play a role, and that your role was different than you anticipated, but that we are all placed in these roles that are not anticipated However, we always get to choose the role we play, or we don't always get to choose the role we play, but we always get to choose how we play it. And so despite all those feelings, in the end, I was proud of how I played my role. I was proud of how I supported my teammates. And like I said, it wasn't the way I wanted to play. But I think what resonates against it is that vulnerability that we all experience in those moments. And you're right, it wasn't easy, but I think in the end, it certainly gave me a lot of lessons and a lot of empathy for others that are going through difficult situations, much more difficult than simply watching your teammates on the ice.
And since then, you've lobbied to get it so that those, third string goalies, they now do get that medal, because they're very much a part of that team, as the starter is, which is awesome.
Well, yeah, at the time, the men's and women's roster size was different. So that's the reasoning why it happened, was that the IIHF felt like women's hockey didn't have the injuries that men's hockey had, so didn't require the roster size. And so anyways, there's always these different excuses. There's not enough room in the village for more roster. So men's was always at 23 and ours was at 20. And I was when I was the third goalie, the 21st person. However, now the roster sizes are even. So in Vancouver, the first year that I wasn't on the team, the roster size up to 21. So at least the backup goalie, the third goalie, could get a medal. Mm-hmm. And now I'm pleased to see that men's and women's hockey are treated equally, at least on an international stage when it comes to numbers, and that the IHF realizes that we play just as hard, put just as much work and effort into being there as the men do, and deserve that same level of respect.
Well, we look at the last Winter Olympics, and I don't think it's an argument that women's gold medal was the most exciting hockey game played at the Olympics, and it definitely got the TV ratings to boot.
Well, and I think in Pyeongchang, the NHLers were not there, so it certainly was the biggest draw.
Yeah.
But even in Sochi, when the NHLers were there, that game was still the most exciting game. I mean, I know that for you and I, we have different feelings on both those games, but regardless of the outcome, the women's game was
incredible.
Both of those games are two of the most exciting sporting events, regardless of if it's women or men playing, that I have ever watched. So that's testament to, those two teams, but also to women's hockey as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about your first Olympics and your third Olympics not receiving a medal, but your second Olympics, you did, and it was a gold medal. In the book you write about after Nagano, your mom, trying to comfort you, said, "Oh, we'll get you a medal." Well, you went out and you got that medal. How there had to be some extra emotion when they placed that medal around your neck, because it wasn't just that medal. There had to be that feeling of, okay, now I got my medal.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, yes. You're right that it felt like a long time coming, but I think what the medal really did is it made me really realize that it wasn't about the medal, that it really was about being proud of the work and effort that you put in. And one of our coaches, Wally Kozak, wrote a note to Haley Wickenheiser after we lost in, I think it was in Nagano, or maybe one of the world championships, but he basically wrote a note to her that she kept in her wallet for years. And it says something to the effect of, if you're not enough with a gold medal, then you'll never, or if you're not enough without a gold medal, you'll never be enough with a gold medal. And I think as athletes, we tend to place a lot of emphasis on the accomplishment, on that success, on that gold medal at the end. But that is a reality, that it is, it is in the end not about that medal. It's about having that balance in your life to be able to appreciate all of the other things that go into it, all of the relationships that you're building, the situations that you're in, and knowing that you put in the work and the effort. And I think ultimately, when I was standing on that blue line receiving the medal, two things really stood out for me. One, first off, I mean, I didn't play that final, so that's going to change my feelings of the medal as well. You know, it's different as a goalie when you don't necessarily play. But even, you know, I think back to my first world championship when I did play in the final and we won the gold medal. To me, I didn't think about the medal around my neck. What I really loved about it was looking down the line and seeing some of my best friends have their dream come true in front of me. And, you know, I think that is what made our team so strong, is that you were constantly thinking about the other people around you. And when I, even now, 20 years later, when I look at the gold medal from, well, any of them, but from that Olympics in particular, you know, you don't think about the games, but you think about the people, you think about the coaches, you think about all of those people in minor hockey that helped you get there. And you think more about the situations and the moments than you do actually about the medal. It's more about what it represents. So, you know, I talk a lot about that in my speeches, that we won a volleyball provincial title when I was in grade 12. And we had this culmination of 4 years, and we ended up winning the big championship with some of my best friends at school. And those feelings are the same. I mean, the feelings of winning a gold medal at the Olympics are the exact same. People always ask me, what does it feel like to win a gold medal? And anything you put your heart and soul into, in the end, if you are successful, those feelings are exactly the same. The only difference is that people, when, you know, talk about this, win 20 years later. So you get to reminisce it a lot more than you would say a high school title, but there's no more sense of jubilation. It just is excitement. And
there's more video footage of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
you have to talk about it years later.
What you're saying makes so much sense, because when I was in high school, rather than making us read the classics that they knew we were just going to read the Cliff Notes for anyway, they wanted us to actually read a book. So they made us read Phil Jackson's book, Sacred Hoops. And in the book, you know, he says, you know, talking about championships, he says, it's not the destination, it's the journey that matters. You know, and what you're saying is very much along the same lines. Is the championship, the gold medal, that's the destination. But what you remember most is everything that it took to get there.
Right. And why ultimately do we have our kids even play sport? You know, it's for all of those lessons along the way. And those can be learnt on your backyard rinks, and those can be learnt on the Olympic stage. So it just is, to me, I was just fortunate to get to do it in front of the world. But the memories that I have really are about the people and the amazing journeys we got to take together.
Now, you mentioned as you're standing there getting the medal, looking at your friends, you're thinking about all the people that helped you get to that point. In your book, you talk about your brother quite a bit and how you both had aspirations of being Olympic athletes, and he came close. There had to be thoughts of him as you were getting that medal. What were those thoughts, and what was his reaction the first time he actually got to see the medal in person?
Well, in the book, I talk about my brother being a swimmer, and growing up, I grew up in a swimming family. And so he was actually at the Salt Lake City Games, dressed in a red swimsuit with a Canada flag draped around his neck, in this regalia. So he was the one running up and down the stairs, leading the fans in chants. And he was, you know, the real cheerleader during the game. So what was my first thought when I looked up at him is, there he is standing in his speedo in the hockey rink. But yeah, you know, it's I guess it's just perspective. It is, my family has always been a huge support to me. And my brother has always been somebody that I have had this unique relationship with, in that I have wanted to do everything he does. I mean, I have always idolized him in a way that has made me want to follow in his footsteps. But it also has meant that he's really the only one that I feel like I can share those huge experiences with and make really jealous. So I think one of the things that having that medal made me, for the first time, really see our roles reversed. That, there he was suddenly cheering for me, and, a full lifetime of looking up to him, and now having that sort of be different was really special. You never really stop to think of the love you have for, as a kid, that's not something that you really think about, right? It's what your parents are always thinking about, but you are not.
Right.
But for him to take the time to be there for the entire time in Salt Lake City, and to just be the biggest Sami fan that existed, was really special to me. And to be able to share in that moment afterwards with him was something really special. And, somebody that really got it too, that understood me in that situation, and how hard the situation was as well, despite the fact that we had this gold medal. And so I didn't necessarily have the same feelings as my teammates, because, when you don't play in the final, it is different. And so I think he got that and understood that, and was able to relay that to other people as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You talked about not playing. And one of the things that really connected with me in the book, and it was about midway through, and the title of it was like, it just hit me of the role I played. At those times, you were the backup goalie. You had your chance at the World Championships, and you were the starter. But at the Olympics, you were a backup goalie. And for me, that was my college career. I wasn't just a backup goalie. I was a Division III JV third string goalie.
Right.
But I still remember the first practice freshman year after tryouts, and our coach came out and he said, "Look, you guys all are here to play a role, and we need to be successful. We all need you to play that role to the best of your ability." He said, "You're all coming from being top line players, starting goalies. Some of you now have to be third, fourth line players and backup goalies." I knew without, waiting for the first game to see the depth chart where I was. And so I embraced that role. Was it easy? No. One of the things I remember in your book too is you talked about not starting one of the games you wanted to, in that feeling that goalies, they might not admit it, but we've all had that feeling of, I want the team to win the game, but I don't want the starter to get the shutout. That's a very real feeling of many backup goaltenders. We want to support our team. We want the best, but we want a little bit of pain at the same time, because it's not us.
Like a 7-6 game.
Exactly. Well, that's just a regular beer league game for me these days. But it's like, there's a lot of honesty there that I think a lot of goalies, if you ask them, to their face, they're going to deny it, but that's the truth. We want to.
Yeah. And I think that goes, beyond goaltending to every position within the game, like you so badly want to make the team, then you make the team as a forward, for instance, and you're on the fourth line. Well, then you want to be on the third line, and you want to play more shifts, right? But then you get on the third line and you're thinking, I should be on one of the top lines. Then you think you should be on the power play. And then when you're on the power play, you're like, well, I'm not taking the shootout final shot. Like, everybody has these aspirations. And, I think that as goalies, we are put in those situations way more often. But what's interesting in talking to other goalies is that most of us have been in all the situations, and, whether you're the third string goalie D3, well, maybe in high school, you're the starting goaltender on your team, and you're the one that's relied on. So I think what is unique about goaltenders is that ability to understand all the other positions and to still support, even though inside you might have this fire inside you, or you might feel a certain way. What it was like to be in that other position. So what it was like to be the starter. What they need. And I think we have a very good understanding of the ability to compartmentalize, and to say to ourselves that, you can deal with those feelings later. But for that day, for that time, it's important to be there for your team. Like you said, it's not always easy, but I think that's not just relegated to goaltending. That goes for people in the workforce that are, wanting to give that presentation or not feeling like they got the pat on the shoulder at work or whatever it is. I think that's a really real emotion. And that's why I wanted to talk about it in the book and not candy coat over it, because you feel it. And so how do you deal with those feelings? And that's what I really wanted to talk about in the book.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay to feel it, but what do you do with that feeling? The
Right.
old water boy, Bobby Boucher, take it and make it your tackling fuel. Let that be what burns that passion to be better. And that's what I tried to do. And, I look at my college career, there were times where it looked like, okay, next year I might get a shot. And then we had some, younger goalies come in or, come over from junior hockey. I was talking to one of the other goalies that I came in with, and he talks about his situation. His high school career was ended in the state playoffs by a fellow named Dave Rogalski, who then 2 years later, after playing junior hockey, came to our school and ended his college career because he stole his spot. And now Dave is a Stanley Cup champion because he was the developmental goalie coach with St. Louis when they won, and now he's the New Jersey Devils goalie coach. And it's like, we would never thought back then that that's what Dave would be doing now, but it was like, yeah, you have these goals and then somebody just comes by and they're just better than you and they take that spot. And it's how do you respond to that?
And what lessons can you draw from that too? Like what amazing things did you learn that you now can impart as a father, things like that you don't think about at the time, but that you now can really understand and empathize with other people.
That's so true. My son just had baseball tryouts for, they have the tryouts in the fall for the spring league team, and he didn't make the team and he was feeling down. It's like, hey, I've been there. Yep, exactly. I feel bad for you, but I think to my wife, I maybe looked like I was a little cold to him, but I was like, no, he's going to be fine. This is what's going to fuel him over the winter. He's going to be asking, go to the batting cage. He's going to get better. And,
and as parents, we can't always make it better. You have to go through tough things like this as kids to really get that fuel sometimes.
Yeah. I remember one coach who kept me and he goes, prove me wrong. Mm-hmm. Best thing you can do, prove me wrong. I want to be proved wrong is what he told me. And I went out there and I proved him wrong. And at the end of the season, he said so, and that was good, a good
right?
feeling.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There are some perks though to being the backup goalie, in my opinion, in that we truly get to let our personalities out and not worry about it. There's the one part the book where you talk about, wearing warmer clothing under your equipment because it was a colder rink. And then I think you had a hooded sweatshirt on and all of a sudden the coach is looking at you, say, get in the game. You're like, oh no, but those are kind of those things, when people think of goalies, I think that those are the things they think of as, when they do those kinds of things. I remember
the toughest thing with Team Canada was that we, it's kind of a misnomer to say that there's a number one goalie, because really the number one goalie is simply the goalie that plays the last game of the season. So up until then, for the entire season, whether there's 2 or 3 goalies, you are getting just as much ice time as those other goalies. So you're kind of always on, and you don't ever really know you're going to be the backup. Others might think it, but you're in that position because you think you can be the number one goalie. So it really isn't until the absolute final game. And it wasn't, I would say, until probably the 2007 year. I was the third goalie after the Olympics. In that World Championship year, we had the Worlds in Winnipeg, which is where I'm from. Yeah. And it was the first time leading into a championship that I had been told prior. So that was really the first time that I felt like, hey, all the pressure's off. Like, what can I do except for, be there for my teammates? And looking back at my career, I wish I had more moments like that where I just was, didn't have to worry about it, because on my club team with the Toronto Arrows, we had this coach that he played sort of a fair system. Mm-hmm. So we just alternated every game. And so every other game I knew I wasn't playing. Whereas with Team Canada, you did not know that. Sometimes you didn't know that until like right before the game. Yeah. But so for those games, sometimes I had snacks in my glove, or, you just knew that you weren't getting at the game. So
Yep.
you can get your nice warm clothes on, and you just hope that the goalie doesn't get pulled, which rarely happens. So
my coach caught me once in college. We would get boxed lunches delivered to the locker room between periods. So I stuffed like 2 or 3 sandwiches in the top part of my breezers as we went back out, and he caught me in the corner eating a ham sandwich. He goes, "What do you got in there?" And I was like, "I got a sandwich." He goes, "Did you bring extras?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Can I have one? I'm kind of hungry."
I often would have between periods have somebody go get me like a Diet Coke or something, like some caffeine or a tea or something, which is not normally something that would be in a dressing room. But I always felt like the games as a backup, and maybe you felt this way, that the day is just so long. Like it's just a lot of time, and you're in your gear for a lot of time. And and also with the national team, we have this like eating schedule that includes like a full pregame meal and then a full postgame meal, assuming you've played 3 hard periods of hockey. Well, you're the backup goalie. You haven't even like touched the ice. Here you are just eating the whole day.
Yeah. And then it's not just eating, but it's like carbo load eating on top of it.
And you're doing nothing.
Yeah. It's like, no wonder I'm gaining weight during the season instead of losing weight like the rest of the team.
With the national team, that was with like my club team, but with the national team, if you were not playing afterwards, you had to do, while everybody else was cooling down, you had to do an actual workout like bike sprints or something. And that was the worst, because you had to do it on your own and you had to replicate what a game would be like. And I get why they did it, but it just sucked because it was always like 11 o'clock at night and you've just done nothing all day. But it was one of those things you just had to do.
Yeah, but those are also things you look back on, and I know myself, I miss it. And I've talked to some other guys I played with, and it's like I don't necessarily miss the games and all of that. I just miss the team aspect of it, and part of that is those crazy workouts and feeling like you just want to throw up and pass out. But it's like, those are the things you miss. And
but you're doing it together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think those are the things that as now an adult in the fitness world and in rec hockey now, I try to duplicate. And I found some great rec hockey teams that, are really close and have developed good friendships, which, that's really what sport is all about. And it's finding those adult rec fitness classes that can duplicate some of those, you find those friendships where people rely on you to be there, and it makes it a little bit easier to get through. But, nothing will duplicate what it was like to play elite hockey, but certainly some of the best moments can still be had still in our adult years.
Absolutely. And that's not to transition, but that's so true. You talk about relying, in adult hockey as a goalie, you're relied on the most because it's like they're the hardest to find. So if a team finds a good, reliable goalie, they're like, all right, here you go. And
well, I tell young kids that are getting into it, and I tell their parents that, it's going to be expensive until they turn 17 or 18. But once you start playing beer league hockey, at least here in Canada, goalies never have to pay. So you pretty much, have free hockey for the rest of your life. So this is the position to be in.
Same here. That's why when it's my turn to bring beer, I always get something a little bit nicer than the cheap beer the guys bring. And in fact, I brought beer last night, and I brought something nice, and they're all going, man, this is better than what we normally have. But don't make me bring it every week, because I do splurge a little bit there to bring them something good for after the game, because I'm a beer snob, so I don't want the cheap stuff.
Right.
And I think when we look at that role you played, Trailblazer should be part of that title too, because you played in a time where there weren't as many girls teams. As you mentioned, Ringette is still big in Canada, but you were playing on boys teams to play at that higher level. you played in some of the early women's professional leagues. You helped organize the CWHL. Looking back, does the magnitude of your role in growing women's hockey, does it ever hit you and you think of, what you've been able to accomplish?
Well, that's very nice. Thank you. I think, when I think back of who are, the trailblazers and the pioneers of our game, a lot of them never got to play. A lot of them were kicked out of the game or told they couldn't play, played on backyard rinks or, perhaps for 10 others found out they were a girl. And there's so many stories like that. So when I think of my career, I feel so incredibly fortunate that I came through at a time when these pioneers and trailblazers had created this path that allowed me to go to the Olympic Games and play hockey. Had I come 5 years prior, that wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have, I wouldn't have been the right age coming through it. I would have probably already been into a job or whatever. I went to school in California thinking I was never going to play hockey again. Simply play beer league hockey. I had no aspirations of playing for the national team or going to the Olympics because that wasn't something we could dream about. So, to all those women and men that helped create that path and that future, they're the ones that I think all of women's hockey should be so thankful for, but whose names are really forgotten in history. So I think what my generation of women did in the game was really stand on their shoulders and allow the world to see that women could play and that women had a passion for the game. So do I think that is trailblazing? No, I think that's simply, taking the torch and keeping it moving and keeping it growing. And when it came time to helping start the Canadian Women's Hockey League and really taking one of the central leadership roles in it, I just felt like I had this ability and I had the time. And part of it was selfish. I wanted to keep playing. I wanted to play in this amazing league. And so to me, I think, I have come from a family of volunteerism. I think it's always been very important. Any team I've ever played on, my parents were part of the, doing the bake sales or selling the equipment or whatever it was. They were always, front and center doing that stuff. So they taught us to do that. And I felt like it was, I always had this motto that if you're going to complain about something, you may as well, you have to change it. You can't just sit back and complain that things are not the way you want them to be. You have to work to make them the way that is best for everyone. And I complained a lot. So I figured that if I'm going to be the one complaining, then I should put the work in and just see how hard it is and be that person that helps with the administration to make it work for everybody. But yeah, I am very proud of the role that I played within professional hockey and getting sort of women's hockey to that next level and allowing myself and so many women of my generation sort of a place to play. But I by no means did it alone. And there was so many other people in this area that helped, but also around the world that grew it in their areas. And I just feel like I came through hockey at a time, just this incredible time where we could take hockey in whatever direction we wanted. And I saw it from its infancy all the way up to my first paycheck in professional hockey. And so I really had this kind of full circle and just feel so fortunate. I think what is going on right now in women's professional hockey, it's hard because now it's a business. Now it is at that next level where it really has to take a big leap to get the funding, get the sponsors. And it takes much more work than the work that we put in. We really just kind of laid a groundwork. But this next, what the girls are going through right now is just, it's hard because I don't know that there is one solution. You can't just work hard and make it happen. It requires money and funding and television rights and, so much more than we ever had to think about while these girls are still toiling away on the national team. So I don't envy these girls and try to, support the current generation as much as we can, the girls of my generation. But it's not easy because it is bigger than just us now. I think so many people now appreciate women's hockey and have ideas about where it should go and what should happen to it. That it has this snowball effect of including so many different people's ideas and opinions and things like that. So it's exciting and it's an exciting time, but I'm glad that I was there at maybe more of a simple time and an easier time within women's hockey.
And that makes sense. And it's been fun to watch it grow. I mean, I love NHL All-Star Weekend for the All-Star Skills Competition. I've always loved that. But now that they're including, the women's Olympians, to me, that just makes it even better because we're seeing individually, head to head, they're just as good. And it's even more fun when some of the women's players get better scores. I
think back to when we first in Salt Lake City, we started to play against the local boys teams, the midget teams. And, the games, we would win some of the games, the boys would win probably most of the games. And then by Torino in that same league, in the AAA boys league, we were winning most of the games and they were winning some of the games. And then in 2010, the girls were winning almost all the games. And then in 2014, they were playing the junior teams and winning just kind of some of the games. So it's amazing the trajectory that it has gone over in that time frame too. And thinking back to like in 2006, we were playing boys AAA hockey and winning most of the games. And we had people like Megan Augusta, who's only 17, like she's their age and she's on our team, could quite easily play with the best players in the world that went on to become NHLers. So yeah, I mean, it's a different game for sure. There's without the contact, it makes for a different thought process on the ice. However, you're right. The skills, when they go head to head, it is amazing to see that, they've been working their entire lives, just like the guys. And while they don't necessarily have the same physical attributes, they can do those skills just as well.
Well, and it's so fun to see somebody like Kendall Coyne and her husband, who is an NFL Super Bowl champion, and they try, he'll get on the ice and try and do some of the stuff, or even some of the off ice stuff. And he's like, I can't do it. It shows the true athlete in that instance, but you mentioned on how the game, the players have just gotten better and better over the years. I know for us, as we were coming up, Goalies World magazine was out there for a while. We could order instructional VHS tapes and, watch the same thing over and over. And maybe there was a summer goalie camp we could go to. That was like the best we could do. Otherwise, it was just, we were left to ourselves watching NHL goalies. I often think for myself, if I were growing up now with things like YouTube, year-round goalie clinics, Sense Arena, stuff like that, where would my game go? What could I do? Now that path is still the same, but it's what, how could I have done? But for somebody like yourself, the women's game is so much different now because there's girls teams everywhere. Here in Minnesota, we have the girls high school state tournament now that they're, almost selling out the XL Energy Center, just like the boys. There's so many more opportunities. Do you ever think about if you were playing today, how much different would that trajectory be?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I at my hockey school, it's just how good the kids are, and I run a goalie school. I just took the Hockey Canada skills certificate, goaltending skills certificate. So it's a 3-day course through Hockey Canada, and you get to talk nothing but goaltending, which is amazing. But seeing all the latest gadgets and everything. And, I only stopped playing professionally in 2018. So I played until the age of 42. And what was amazing during that career was, like I said, we started with skate saves and I ended with, RVHs. And so what your body had to kind of go through and morph through, and the different muscles that were being used. And so I had a goalie coach that I actually only found later in my career. I'd never really had one with the national team. And I was listening to Kyla's interview on Tendy Talks the other day, and how she talked about going to the library to check out books.
Yes.
That's what I did. I would go and check out the books, and the one at my library was Vladislav Tretiak. And so I would follow along with what he was doing in the off-ice training and all that. But in my career, I had to learn all those new things. And that's why I'm always amazed at goaltenders that kind of went through that era. Somebody like Henrik Lundqvist, who, really had to change his game. And when I go to see my coach, their group sessions. And so there'd be 10-year-old kids on the ice with me doing the skills better than me. And you had to be okay with, and Kyla talked about this in her interview too, you had to be okay with not being the best at something. You had to be, you had to have this mentality of, I'm just willing to learn, and I'm willing to change because I know the game is growing and I know this is better. But it would, to do a post lock for me, like to get my pad on the post and get my foot in the right position. I mean, it took me an entire summer to just to be able to get that movement down, to be able to push off the post and to be able to lean into the post. And, I felt like I just learned how to do a VH. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this is switching all over again. And now we're into an RVH. And so, I think throughout my career, I never felt like I was, the best at a skill. I think what my skill was in the actual game, but that I was always willing to learn and to just go over it and practice it. And so, a lot of these new things, I never had the sensory, the VR.
Yeah.
That looks amazing. But I feel like I kind of lived most of it. Like some of it in the last maybe 2 years is kind of new. But I do feel like a certain part of it is a little bit overwhelming. So like for the young kids, yeah, they all come in with this great ability to slide and to move. But there now is so much onus and pressure on parents to get them extra goalie sessions, to make sure that they're in the camps and to make sure they have all the gadgets. And if they don't have the latest gear, they're, how are you going to be as good? And so I feel like for you and I of a different generation, we didn't have to live that,
Right.
And so a certain part of that simplicity I wish was still in the game, because now everybody just has this higher level. It isn't necessarily about your athleticism or your hard, you can't just kind of hard work your way out of something. You need to actually be working with the goalie coach and doing video and watching goalies on YouTube, and you need to be doing all that just to be at that level. Mm-hmm. Whereas for you and I, if we were able to do one of those things, you can get yourself to that next level and get yourself to the next level. So yeah, I think it's a lot on young kids. It's a lot of pressure, and it's a different game. It's a game where you're on the ice and your hips and your knees, and there's just a lot more stress on the joints than I think we ever had. And so yeah, where could my game have gone in the last couple of years, I guess, if I had these things? I don't know. I think I'd bring back the 2-pad stack is what I would do. Yeah.
I try and do it every week in the beer leagues. I usually get one or two out there, and I've been playing in my league for a couple of years now. And it's the same teams year after year. So they're not even fazed by it anymore. They're just like, oh, there he goes again.
Do you do any goalie sessions? Like, do you go learn still?
No, because there really aren't any here in the Twin Cities area for beer league goalies. One of my college teammates, he runs a pretty successful goalie clinic here in the Twin Cities, Devonair Goaltending. Matty Rooney works at it in the summertime, and I've been pushing him to have a beer league clinic.
What if you just went with the kids? I feel like I always just went with the kids. Well, even though I was a pro goalie, I was just out there after school. Their school time ended. It was at 4:30 every day. So
I think that would be a lot of fun, especially as I'm getting new modern pads where it's like I have to learn how to do the butterfly slide with new pads because I can't do them with my current ones. So it's like I might have to do that, but last week's episode with Adam Carlson, he coaches with my buddy Ryan, and I floated the idea by him. He's like, I'm totally on board for this, but his idea is we need to have it at like a resort on Mille Lacs Lake, and have maybe integrate a little bit of golf, and that way, once the ice sessions are done, there's maybe
okay, all right, I'll bring the female goalies, you bring the male goalies, and just be a big party.
I think there's a market for the beer league goalie weekend camp. We call it a camp. Yes.
Right. You have sparked my mind. Let's start to plan it.
Yeah, I am all for it.
Just got to get the shooters. That's the only thing that would be, got to get enough shooters.
If we promise them half price beer, I think they'd be down. But even the golf aspect, I'm not a golfer, but I'd be down for it with a bunch of goalies, because it's not like we're going to keep score anyway.
Right.
I want to be mindful of time. Knowing you listened to Kyla's episode, I end with a list of 10 rapid fire questions. They're the same questions I've asked every single guest, from bantam goalies to fellow Canadian gold medalist Eddie Belfour. So they're the same questions, and that's what I like about them, because you get so many different answers from all these goalies. And the first one is, what's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days of coach? I always think of a Blackhawks game I went to, and Mike Keenan was coaching for the Florida Panthers, and he lost it, and he's throwing sticks on the ice at the referees. Craziest coaching moment like that.
Yeah, I would say within women's hockey, we don't have as many crazy coaches, but we did have an incident when I was in a national championship, and I was actually not playing in the final. It was the coach that played the Fairsies back and forth, and I had played the provincial final, so it wasn't my turn to play the national final. And he was talking to one of the players on the bench, and he got hit in the face with a puck, with a slap shot, and it got hit right here, and it didn't in his eyebrow for listeners, and it didn't burst. So it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And he just, he was so focused on the game, and I am the backup goalie, and I can see this thing growing on his head. And it got to the point where it was like half a softball size, it was like elephantitis almost on the side of his head. And I finally had to be like, Ken, like, there's something on your face, and anyways, he got rushed to the hospital, and it was a huge hematoma in there. So that might've been the craziest like coaching moment of him, like being like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, no, there's like a whole nother head on the side of your body. So yeah, we don't have any, like, I don't think I have any like terrible coaches that threw things on the ice or anything like that.
They'll let our Kenny coach come into the locker room, kick in the garbage can.
Yeah, of which I just did an appearance on Letterkenny. That's funny that you mentioned that.
Oh, fun! I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, season 9. Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for that one to come out. It's funny you mentioned that story, because there was a video where it was soccer versus hockey, and they show the soccer coach. There's a paper airplane coming down from like the third deck. It hits him in the head, and he goes down like somebody shot him, and then they have a clip of Joe Quenneville getting hit with the puck on the bench, and it draws blood, and he just laughs.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the other one was, I think it was my junior year. We were in Spooner, Wisconsin for a game. It was my birthday. I remember that. And I was the number 3 goalie, so I didn't dress. So I'm on the bench, and there's a slap shot that comes right at our bench. The backup goalie, who dressed, standing in front of me, hops out of the way, and the puck hits me right on my knuckle. And me being stupid, it was just a natural reaction, because it was my blocker hand to go like this to knock the puck out of the way too. So, but I pulled my choppers off, and it's just like a blood blister getting bigger and bigger. And there's nothing more embarrassing than having to go to the visiting team's bench to talk to their
the
trainer for an injury when you're the backup goalie who didn't even dress.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I trying to remember, I think she just took a needle and like popped it, and then like put a bandage on there. So it was like, yeah, I'm the 3rd string goalie in street clothes.
Probably all your other crazy stories though from most of the guys, that's probably why we need to change the culture in hockey.
Yeah.
It's probably because of a lot of those other stories. So
yeah, but it's like, really, I'm the one that has to get attention. I'm not even, I
oh
didn't
yeah,
even,
yeah, that's not even a
yeah.
I
It's
feel
like,
like we've all been there where you're just embarrassed. You're like, I'm
yeah,
not even playing.
I didn't even touch the ice for warm-ups, yet alone the game,
Yeah.
and I got to get medical attention. So my next question is, what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
What's my favorite one? Good question. You know what? My first, like my own personal Stanford one, I actually painted in an art project class. And interestingly enough, we never got free national team masks. And so I had a helmet when I first joined the national team. And then I got to use one of the junior team's masks, but didn't get to keep it. And then my first one I got to keep, I had to repaint over 3 or 4 times. So I only actually have ever had 2 masks in my career, which is not very safe now, obviously,
Right.
now that we know that. But in terms of NHL masks, good question. I mean, the iconic Eddie Balfour, the Ken Dryden, maybe the Ken Dryden one with the circles.
Yep.
You know, when I think of like, what is an iconic mask? You know, the Terry Sawchuk one with the scars is one that I think most people think of when they think of goaltending.
Yeah.
But some really cool women's ones of recent. I think what they can do with their helmets is amazing, and all the extra stuff that they can get on there is pretty special. So
yeah.
I don't know if I have a favorite women's one that I've seen lately. That they're all they're so intricate. So yeah, let's go with Eddie Balfour or Terry Sawchuk.
Yeah, those are good ones, and I liked Todd Miska, who painted Eddie Balfour's masks. His son is playing in the Colorado organization now, and last year he was playing for the Colorado Eagles in the AHL, so he had the Balfour Eagle. And I'm sitting there going, if anybody should and could wear the Eagle mask, it would be him, because his dad's the one that painted it. And now this year he's got a, if you remember Manny Fernandez's Minnesota Wild mask, which was kind of like the Wild, I think it's a bear. I don't know what their logo really is.
Yeah.
But it was kind of the mouth open. Well, he's got that, but in Colorado colors, and it looks so cool because that was another mask that his dad painted. So I think it's kind of cool.
I love the ones these days that have the where you can see that, like the fake hair and ears. You know, and the old school helmet. Like the amazing things that you can do with that are pretty incredible.
Todd was actually the first one to do that.
Cool.
He did Steve Shields' mask when he had that stitch mask done, and those are great too. So the next question, what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
My favorite rink,
there's only a few to pick from, right?
I know. I think my favorite all-time rink is the Norbury Community Center in Winnipeg, which is the one I grew up on, outdoor rink, and the one I always go back to at Christmas and whenever I'm in Winnipeg.
And, you know, for me, that's usually what it is too. You know, a lot of us have skated at, you know, the bigger arenas, and whether they have fans in them or not, they're really cool. But it's usually that one you got your start in, where there's that sentimental, you know.
For sure. And, you know, people ask me at the Olympics, like, it must be hard to play in front of so many people. But really, Olympic Games don't have that many people. They tend to be in, like in Salt Lake, it's at the, you know, there tend to be AHL rinks or junior rinks. And then one whole side is filled with media. So, you know, people are not right on top of you like they are in NHL rinks. And it was really special to get to play in NHL rinks and have them packed for women's hockey. I mean, that was really neat. So you know, those moments will last for an eternity, but they're not the same as that first rink that you played in, right?
Yeah. Well, those first rinks you play at, you can almost close your eyes and smell the smells of that rink, you know. And even for me, the Southwest Ice Arena is where I played. And each locker room had its own smell almost.
Where in Minnesota do you live? Or
I grew up in Chicago, and then I the classic story. Met my wife in college, and she was from Minnesota, so we stayed in Minnesota. But I'm just outside the Twin Cities. If you ever watched the movie Fargo, White Bear Lake, go Bears.
Nice. Well, growing up in Winnipeg, we used to always play down in Minnesota.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In fact, my sister, or not my sister, my wife, when her brother got LASIK surgery, he drove up to Winnipeg to get it done. Well, he couldn't drive home by himself. So my wife drove up to Winnipeg. He got his LASIK done. And then the next day they drove home. So she's like,
That's
the one
funny.
and only time I've been to Canada was Winnipeg, and it was over.
Well, whenever I'm talking to Americans that don't know where Winnipeg is, I just say, well, we used to go cross-border shopping to Fargo, just to put it in perspective. So
yeah. Yeah.
But I also heard in one of the podcasts that you were potentially moving to Nashville, but you're not moving.
Yeah, we were considering it. Never been there, neither of us. But we were just like, hey, it's an adventure, but we're in a really good school district, and to find a comparable one, it just wasn't working out. So we said, hey, our kids are, freshmen in 8th grade. We can wait 5 years, and then
well, one of my good friends from the national team, she met a guy from Nashville, got married. And so she runs the Predators girls hockey in Nashville.
Very
now.
cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yeah, there's quite the hockey scene down there too, which is,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
As we were talking about it, my wife did stop. She's like, are you okay, like, moving down there with hockey? I was like, oh no, I've already been in touch with Bones, and he said he can help me get on a team and ice time and everything else. And she's like, okay, so you've gone a little further into this than I thought. I was like, yeah, I know where each rink is, so we're good.
We're good.
Yeah. So we're not moving yet. We got about 4.5, 5 years before that happens. So we're going to go down there a couple times and check out the areas we like. And
yeah. Well, my husband loves it. And my friend Delaney Collins is there and loves it. So eventually when you guys retire to Nashville.
Yeah. And, who knows, we might go somewhere else. We've been to Arizona a couple times. We love the area, but it's like, do we want to live here year round and only see brown? Because, I'm from Chicago. She's from Minnesota. We have
seasons,
technically 4 seasons, but it's more like 37. So we like to see the foliage change every year. Nashville does get snow. We did see it's on average 4 inches a year, and our kids are like, seriously, that's it. But that'd be enough. I don't need to keep shoveling.
Right.
So I'd be okay with that. So I don't know. We'll keep looking. We'll see where we wind up. But nice thing is we both have jobs where we work remotely. So wherever we live, it does, isn't job dependent. We can up and move whenever we want.
Right. Well, that's great.
Yeah. So where were we? Next question. Favorite youth hockey memory. This is one that usually has some good responses.
Yeah. I mean, so many great youth hockey memories. In Canada, we call it minor hockey. Favorite one. I don't know. I used to love playing mini sticks in the hotel lobbies. So I think it was, the time away from the ice for me. And, being the only girl on boys teams, they all kind of treated me like their sister. And so, I really felt like, because they included me in some of those extra games, I really felt like I was a part of the team. So, I think all those tournaments and, all those times where I didn't have to prove that I belonged, that they accepted me just for who I was. And they were my fiercest allies. And I'm so thankful, because I could have had any guy along the way, I'm sure, could have made my life miserable.
Yeah.
But none of them did. And I just, I know so many of my peers that were forced out of the game because of miserable experiences. And while I had some miserable people, they tended not to be my teammates, and my teammates tended to be the ones that supported me the most.
Well, there was that story out of Pennsylvania this week that we're recording of that girl that's playing on the boys varsity team, and the things that were said to her by the opposing fans are just terrible. And it's like, where were the parents to put an end to that? I don't get it.
Well, it's, the mob mentality. And I think that those of us that have been in the game that have been, different in any way, whether that is skin color, sexuality, gender. Those stories don't surprise us. And
Yeah.
I hope we get to a point where those stories surprise.
Yeah.
Nobody should ever have to live those. And it's
Right.
unfortunate that so many people still have to do that in
Absolutely.
2021, like crazy.
Yeah, it just I read that and I was like, you got to be kidding. Where were the parents? Of these kids, not only of the kids that were doing this, but where were the parents that were at the game to do something about it? It's just
and even just peers. Like I said, I think it's that mob mentality that it's the person beside you is doing it, and you kind of get wrapped up into it, and so and it comes down to really taking a hard look at yourself. And I'm sure that 95% of those people in those stands regret their decision for doing that or for being in that situation and saying those things. But at the time, it seemed like that's what everybody's doing, and so we need to change that culture within hockey that allows that to be okay.
Now you talk about the peers, and I just had a memory of my son's baseball season this year, and him and a few of the other boys, they like to wear their pants high and have the stirrups. And the one kid was talking about the high pants and referring to them as knickers. And this other kid next to him hadn't heard the term before and misheard him. And his eyes just got real big. He looks at him, he goes, Chase, you can't say that. And he goes, what? And he goes, well, you just said, like, that's not okay to say that anymore. And I had overheard enough of it. I just started laughing. I go, no, it's okay, buddy.
That's not what he said.
He said knickers, which is short for Knickerbockers, like the New York Knicks basketball team. It's an old reference to pants.
Like the bloomers, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I thought he said, the word we shouldn't be saying. And I was like, I appreciate.
Well, good, but good for him to stand up, and to say. Right.
And that's what I told him. It's like, good for you for, thinking that's what he said and saying something about it, not just being quiet. But of course, we got a big laugh out of it afterwards. And I was telling his mom and dad, and they just started laughing. And there was some pride in the fact that, he stood up. He did what they would want him to do in that situation.
And that's, it's not always easy. It's, So.
Yeah. So the next question, what's your favorite stick that you've ever used?
What I loved was when the TPS Louisville came out first with rubber on the handle.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's, it just is ingrained in most of them that you have some sort of grip in there. But that was like revolutionary that it had this, and it was like kind of taped on, like it was on there, but it was kind of taped on and extra. And when those came out, I felt like that's my iconic stick. To me, I fell in love with that stick.
Yeah, I remember those. And if I remember right, that one almost had like I don't know if it was rubber or something, but like a reinforcement on the splines of the paddle too.
Yeah, that's where I'm talking about. Like that's like it was almost like pulled over and then just kind of like taped. Then it became kind of more part of the like a rubberized paint almost afterwards, but initially it was just like pulled over.
Yeah, but it had like that rubber grip at the top of the paddle too. I remember that stick. I never used one, but I remember it. And I actually, Trevor Kidd did it, and so I thought it was a great idea. The tape on the top and bottom part of the paddle, and then Louisville came out with that stick. Is like, I should be buying that stick, but I loved I was using Cooper Bauer Reactor 5s at the time, which is my all-time favorite goalie stick.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Well, once these came out, like this stick, this is the Bauer stick. The lightness and the ability to shoot with them was just, ridiculous. Like I said, the fact that you didn't have to rely on how wet the stick was for how good your shot was going to be.
Yeah. Well, every time I talk to somebody who's used a Christian goalie stick, is like, I can tell if you actually use a Christian goalie stick, if you have the memories of putting the glue in the heel and the vise overnight to get a few more, games out of it. And they're like, oh God, absolutely. Everybody I know had to do that.
We actually went to the Christian plant. What's the name of the town in Minnesota?
That is in Evelyn. Yeah, Eveleth is where the Christian plant was, I think.
But is that near War Road?
Yeah, War Road,
Eveleth,
they're all up in that area. Roso's over there.
Yeah.
Just a great hockey communities.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a rink in high school, and there were two brothers that grew up in Eveleth, and they talked about, playing high school hockey with Frank Bismarck, Mr. Zero, and skating the sidewalks to school in the winter. And it's like,
that's funny.
They grew up in the true golden age of hockey in Eveleth at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question: best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, in the locker room, directed at you, not directed at you.
Well, I think the poor girl that suffered this week in Pennsylvania from a whole crowd yelling at her. I had that on several occasions. And some terrible, terrible things that an entire crowd yell at. And to say that some of those were pretty terrible, but they were so terrible that they would make me laugh. It never really got under my skin, but the things that they would call me, or the jokes, and just the fact that you could have 5,000 people yelling the same taunt was always amazing to me. So yes, I would say that I had some terrible things yelled at me. Everything you could imagine that should never be yelled at women. So yeah, not repeatable on air. I was never necessarily one to chirp, and I always felt like I never wanted to make the opposition mad, because I always felt like that would just fire them up and light something under their belly, and I didn't want to do that. So I would say that I wasn't much of a talker. I mean, I was a talker out there, but I wasn't much of a negative talker or chirper out there.
Yeah, same here. Every now and then, at least in the beer leagues, there's those guys that you just know they're out there having a good time. And last night was one of them. The guy was in front of me trying to scream me, and I just tapped him on the back of his leg, like, "Hey, I'm right here. I see ya." And he turns around, he goes, "That was you, wasn't it?" And I go, "It could have been worse. I could have gone wah on you." So then next time he's in front of me, I just lightly tapped, the inside of his leg a little bit higher, and he goes, "Don't do it. Don't do it." That's probably the worst I've gotten with chirping on the ice. Usually if I'm chirping, it's my own teammates that I'm picking on.
Nice.
But that's usually how hockey is. I've said it before. Hockey players, you fit if they're picking on you, and the worse they are picking on you, the more you're accepted.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, I know you're not much of a beer drinker, but what's the worst post-game beverage, I'll say, that you've had?
The worst one I've had?
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, one of my new rec hockey teams that I now play on, the Honey Badgers, they have, well, not in the pandemic or post-pandemic, but prior, there was always somebody that had to bring drinks afterwards and snacks. And when you get women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, drinks and snacks are very different. So
yes,
a full table with tablecloth and sometimes champagne and orange juice. It could be Tim Hortons and Baileys. I mean, just the amount of effort that goes into these beverages. So all of those have been amazing, but it is certainly very different than any other locker room. It's funny because playing national team for so long, you don't drink in the dressing room after. So when I joined beer league hockey, you're gonna laugh about this. My first beer league team, I was playing forward, and it came up to my time to bring the beer. And so my husband's a beer drinker, but I'm not a beer drinker. And so, but I want to, like you want to impress your teammates, right? So go out and I get like a bunch of different beers because I don't know what people like. And I'm kind of new to the team. So get a bunch of different like flavors and stuff. And anyways, I don't refrigerate it. So I don't even think about it. And so, I just have it and I bring it in a little box, like it comes from the beer store. And afterwards I'm like, guys, look what I have. It's all just warm beer. And so that became my nickname on that team, Warm Beer.
Yeah. See, it's funny because most of the goalies I talk to, they're like, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's warm, it's bad.
I know.
As long as it's cold, it doesn't matter. It's good.
I didn't even think about it. So terrible beer league player.
Lesson learned, right?
Right. Lesson learned. Exactly.
Ever since then, it's been cold.
It's been cold and it's been like frigid. I make sure like it is refrigerated. It is in double coolers and it is in my hockey bag.
See, my grandma would have loved that beer because she grew up in England where they like to drink their beers at room temperature. Right. And we took a family trip there in '96 during the Atlanta Olympics. And when we walked to the corner pub, you know, they knew we were coming because of my uncle. But as soon as they heard the accent, the bar owner knew that, you know, Americans like their beer cold. So they asked my dad that first night, because we were there for, I think, 2 weeks, you know, what kind of beer are you going to be drinking? And so he tasted a few. He's like, yeah, this is the one I like. So they made sure to keep a couple cold for him. And when they pull one out, they'd put another one in. So he had cold beer the whole time. And
that's nice.
Yeah, they were a lot nicer to my dad in the 2 weeks we were there than it sounds like they were ever were to my uncle, because on the last night, you know, they gave him a couple pint glasses and a bar towel and everything. And my uncle looks at the bar keep and he goes, you know, all these years I've been coming in, the only thing I've ever gotten was a boot out the door. And she looks at him, she goes, and you keep it up, you'll get another one. She reminded me of the barkeep from the TV show Ted Lasso. Same personality, awesome. Just like that. It was fun. In fact, I still remember the first night we walked into the, I call it night because it was probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but we had just gotten there. So to us, it was probably 12 o'clock at night. And I had an Eddie Belfour jersey on. There was this old fella at the end of the bar, and he saw it and started talking hockey. He was a big hockey fan. He followed the British leagues at the time. And so every night we went in, he was there, and we would sit there and talk hockey. And my aunt and uncle came about a year or two later, and he sent me a jersey from one of the local teams, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's really neat.
Yeah. So next question, and this seems to be a very polarizing one with goalies. When you tape your stick, do you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
I don't really care.
See, I
would say that I probably would go from toe to heel for most of the time, but I certainly would not care if somebody else was to tape my stick, or, you know, in the moment. To me, it's being very picky. It's not like we are stick handling and it matters that much, right?
Right. Well, you know, the ones that have said they typically go toe to heel do play the puck more. Connor Beaupre, Don Beaupre's son, he said he very much is toe to heel because he likes to play the puck a lot and he feels the puck comes off it better. It's like, hey, I'm going to take your work, so I'm terrible at it. So yeah, I typically go heel to toe because started playing in the days of wooden hockey sticks where you had to tape that heel, because so many kids today don't even tape the heel, but you had to tape that
this
heel.
Is actually this is a blade tape. So in the last probably 5, maybe 8 years of my career, I used blade tape.
Okay.
And loved it for its longevity.
Yeah.
And loved it for its ability to sort of cushion the puck. And I felt like I had more feel with it. And I was getting free sticks. So that made a big difference.
Yeah. I'm surprised we don't see more goalies actually using the blade tape. But yeah.
I really I loved it for playing the puck. The thing that it does cushion the puck more, which you do have to get used to sort of how you kind of rebound control and everything. But I mean, I loved it. I just felt like I got more feel from it, and I could really direct the puck where I wanted it to go.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. How do you stick the sticker on the? That should be the question. Do you go heel to toe? Toe to heel, or just stick the sticker on?
Yeah, or do you go from the center out?
Yeah, you got to get all the bubbles out.
Yeah. Now you've thrown a wrinkle into my question. I'm going to have to call everybody back and get to re-ask it.
You have to blade tape. You like it?
Yeah.
Now there's so many different products too. It's not just blade tape, right? You can get different manufacturers make the same thing. So
yeah, well, and even for, like they've got butt ends and a couple other ones for the grip at the top. I tried the butt end grip, and I've been using one for I think 3 years now, and it's great. The only problem is I'm still using a foam core wood stick, so they don't go on those sticks very easy like they do the composites. It took me a little bit of a finesse to get it on there. It wasn't.
But you don't have to spend like half an hour just going around and around and around, right?
Right, exactly. And what was even better is the knob was the same exact size of the tape knob I would do. So it was like,
yeah, perfect.
Yeah. But now it's 3 years old and starting to dry rot a little bit, but my stick's kind of at the end of its life too. So it's like, all right, it lasted. I'm happy with that investment. So we're almost done. Favorite number to wear and why?
So I wore number 1 most of my career. Growing up, I think of our generation, there's 2 jerseys, and there's either 1 or 30 or 1 or 35, 1 or 31, whatever the 2 numbers are. So I wore some of those throughout my career too. I wore 30 and 31, 35. I joined the team. The goalies that were there already had the numbers in the 30s, and the 1 was available. So I took it, but I did like how a small 1 on the back of a jersey kind of looked and sounded. And it wasn't until I even, I really thought about how that went together when I was at a golf tournament one time, and Dennis Hull, who is Bobby Hull's brother, was there, and they had a ton of NHL guys and some women, and they were auctioning off our jerseys at the end of the night, and Dennis Hull bought my jersey. And so I went over to him, and I, was really excited. I said, thank you so much for, I think it was like $500 to the charity. And thank you for supporting the charity. And Dennis Hull was like, who are you? I said, I'm Sami Jo Small. That's my jersey you just bought. I'm a goalie with the Olympic team. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. And he had my jersey on backwards, and it just said small and the number 1. And he was just like pointing down. I was like, oh, I didn't know my jersey would be used that way. So ever since then, I'm like, oh gosh, what did I create? So yeah. Who knew?
Oh,
but I did like, up until that moment, I really loved it.
Yeah. Well,
but I would say my all-time favorite number was number 13. So every other sport, I wore number 13. And had I been in the era where you could probably pick your own number, I might have picked another number, but because I had one for so long, I kind of stuck with it.
So it's interesting that you liked 13, since so many people are superstitious about that number. Like in college, our coach,
that's why I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Our coach wouldn't order the number 13 because he didn't like it. And yeah, oddly enough, that's my dad's favorite number too.
I think it lends itself to a certain type of person, I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point. So the last question I have is probably my favorite. What advice do you have for young goalies?
So generally what I tell young goalies at my hockey school is that, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, but the goaltending can be really fun. However, goals are going to go in, and that we have all let in goals, and you and I are a fair share. I mean, for me, millions in my career when you count practices and games, and so to not allow that goal or that moment to define you, but really to find a strategy to be able to bounce back from goals, from defeats, from setbacks, because that lesson within goaltending is going to serve you the best for the rest of your life. So, figure out how to look for that next puck and not dwell on the past, but really look forward. That doesn't mean you can't evaluate what has happened and that you can't learn from those experiences. However, you can't let it define you. And you need to constantly be looking for that next puck, and wanting that puck, wanting that shot to come, that next shot to come.
As Ted Lasso says, be a goldfish.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Be a goldfish. Forget. Although important to learn, but forget, move on, park it. We had a sports psychologist that talked a lot about parking it, and And for me, I used a lot of logbooking and journaling to allow myself to park it. After games, I would recount how every goal went in, what I could have done differently. And, at times was hard on myself, but I reserved that for after the game, not for during the game. I tried to really just focus on that next puck. I told myself I'd deal with it later. And so in that moment, you're not letting one goal derail you for the next shot or the next goal. And we've all seen goalies that are like that one goal goes in and that's just the end of the game. So really seeing each puck for its own entity. And it's always a new moment.
Yeah. Great advice. And I think all good goalie coaches, that's one of the first things they teach their goalies is you got to learn from it, but you can't dwell on it. Once that ref gets the puck, you got to hang your head high because your team feeds off your emotions. And if you're standing back there with your head down, their head is down. You got to pop back up and,
you're as much of a leader back there for them. Yeah. To be a good role model, right?
Yep. Yeah. And is my goalie coach used to tell us, even if you have to fake it, you got to put that smile on and show confidence, even if you don't feel it. Well,
that's some great advice. I like that.
I've taken up way more time than I said I would, so I appreciate you bearing with me.
No problem. No, this has been really great. Yeah, it's been fun.
Usually what happens when goalies are talking, when I was talking to Kelly Rudy, I think we were about 45 minutes in. It's like, we are going to go long. It's like, are you okay, Kelly? He's like, yeah, I'm good. I got beer here. We're sitting there having beer as we were talking. And I was talking to Kevin Woodley from In Goal, and he was the one that looked at me and he's like, are you good on time? Because if I know you've listened to In Goal, and he's known for one last question and about 37 times. And
right, exactly. One more question. Just one more question. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the conversation there. It wasn't quite long, but it was a fun conversation. So thank you for your time. It's been a thrill talking to you. Where can goalies find you on social media if they want to follow you as well?
Yeah. So thank you for asking. Everywhere on social media at Sami Jo Small. And it's SAMIJO SMALL, including my website. Anybody wants any more information about how or where to buy the book that I just published in the pandemic, which is not always the easiest time to publish. But the sales have been going really well. And I think, it is really the story that can relate to all goaltenders. And so if you want any information where to get that, that's on my website, which is also Sami Jo Small. That's about it. I can never talk enough goaltending. So I so appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad that we can connect in this way. And I think that you're right. When two goalies get together, there just never is an end to the stories. We just have all these similar shared experiences that nobody else really gets except for us.
And
thank you for letting me to verbalize that.
What I have found through doing the podcast is that's exactly the case. Is goalies understand goalies, and it doesn't matter what levels we've played at. We all have the same stories. They're just at different rinks. Totally. Same experiences, and it's just fun. And as I tell every goalie of age, if you're in the Twin Cities, let me know and I'll buy you a drink, and we'll probably talk for 4 more hours.
Sounds good.
Yes. Well,
if I am ever down at Mall of America, I will give you a call.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that. When my wife and I got married, we got married here in the Twin Cities, and all of my aunts in Chicago were excited because they're like, now we have a reason to go there. They all flew in a few days early just so they could go there.
Well, I swear, looking back at it now, like that's why we had tournaments there, is for our parents, Yeah.
And then those of us that live here are like, no, we avoid that place. And you can't really say it this way anymore, but it's like you avoid the Mall of America like the plague. Like you do not want to go there. Maybe Christmas time because you want to do all your shopping at once, but that's it.
Yeah.
You know, we avoid it. Although they are talking.
Yeah, but for all of us tourists, we love it. So.
Yeah, they are talking of possibly expanding it. So we'll see how that goes.
Crazy.
Yeah, they want to add a water park, even though there's one like right across the street. So
right, why not?
Yeah,
make it bigger, make it better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's already got 2 hotels. I think it has now. So why not make it bigger?
Yeah.
So, well, thank you again, and you know, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, and all the best to your kids too as they navigate sports, school, life, all that stuff. And good luck to you and your wife as you figure out where you want to live for the rest of your life.
Thank you. That was an amazing conversation with Sami Jo. I have to thank her for being so gracious with her time too. If you haven't already, get her book, The Role I Played. You can get it on her website, samijosmall.ca, or you can get it on Amazon, but Amazon doesn't give you the option to get the book signed. Be sure to follow Sami Jo on social media simply by searching Sami Jo Small. That's SamiJosmall. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube simply by searching for Wash Up Goalie. Visit washupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey video highlights, and of course, all podcast episodes. If you want some Wash Up Goalie or Tendy Talk apparel as we head into the Christmas season, be sure to visit my Threadless shop by clicking the merchandise link on my website. If you like this podcast, go listen to the BLPA Big Show. It's the OG BLPA Podcast Network show where a couple of beer league players talk beer league hockey, draft experience shenanigans, and exploits from around the game. Be sure to check out the full lineup of hockey-related podcasts on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. There are too many to list here, but shows like the Quack Report podcast, the Tell It Abs It Is podcast, and the King's Den podcast can all be found. I need to thank the band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music on my podcast. If you can download their music on iTunes or listen wherever you stream music from. I'm always working on lining up other goalies to talk to. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washupgoalie39@gmail.com or send me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you're a brand who wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the podcast platform you're listening on. It's a quick action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. Until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck.